You're live. Great. Welcome everybody to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. It is Thursday. Wow. It's Thursday, May 7th. And we are looking at two housing bills today. And we're going to begin with 757, which is our manufactured home housing bill. And limited equity cooperatives. And we have the sponsor of the bill, Representative Gail Ezzo here to join us, who, having listened to our testimony last week, our conversation, would like to weigh in. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you. I'd like to add, first of all, thank you,
yourself again.
Gail Ezzo, representing Colchester and the Committee on Minutes, House General and Housing. I'd like to add some perspective to the discussion held on Thursday, April 30th, regarding H 757, Section 7, page 8, lines 15 through 18, which proposes treating mobile home LECs as nonprofit corporations for the purpose of state funding and grants. First, as noted on page 9, lines 1 through 2, this change does not affect tax treatment. It does not alter the relationship between an LEC and any tax authority, meaning the IRS. When you register a nonprofit in Vermont, you're creating a legal organization at the state level with the Vermont Secretary of State. But that does not automatically make your organization tax exempt at the federal level. To be tax exempt under sections like Internal Revenue Code, Section 501c3, you must apply separately to the Internal Revenue. This is not the intended purpose of Section 7. The purpose of the bill's provision is to align Vermont statute with the way grant-making organizations operate. Most funders are unable to award grants to for-profit entities and require non-profit status as a 501(c) or a designation, or in this case, a state designation as verifiable for eligibility. As David Hall noted, the current list is incorrect. Some indicate domestic for-profit and some indicate domestic nonprofit. He reported that they should all be listed as business corporations. During its testimony before the House General and Housing Committee, he indicated that if granted the authority through the bill, he could amend the designation upon request by the manufactured home limited equity cooperative for purposes related to grant eligibility and funding. These manufactured home limited equity cooperative types are for public purpose, and for-profit implications can trigger automatic rejection. To work around this, applicants must explain the law, 11 VSA 1598, to demonstrate that they serve a public purpose and don't generate profit or individual equity. These extra steps create unnecessary work, which would delay the timeline and potentially discourage funding. So with that, I'd like to stop because that seemed to be where there was a bit of a snap during that conversation, that it tended to lean toward nonprofit being tax exempt. And this is not what the bill is attempting to do. It's just trying to clear up, as David had said, the list is incorrect. And they are, what he had said is what the bill is trying to do will do exactly the opposite. They're listed as, he said that they're listed as corporation cooperatives, which automatically triggers for-profit.
Okay, Gail, I hate to tell you that, but that's complicating it for me. My understanding is that what you're trying to accomplish in this section is that you're trying to enable all of these cooperatives be able to apply for grants, and that with some eligibility requirements are that they be nonprofits and that they are not eligible for things like water or sewer infrastructure or IT infrastructure, whatever the park is looking to invest in. And that some of these grants are the eligibility of the biggie nonprofits. Could we, I think we're understanding that. Could we limit this just to mobile home parks that are cooperatives and not just all? Because there are other limited equity cooperatives, not just mobile homes. So one thought had been to limit this just to mobile home parks that are.
That was the purpose.
That
was the original
right,
purpose.
but I'm not sure it says that. And then the other thing is because we're unclear on the grants that and what their eligibility requirements are. Because we're looking at AOP, we're looking at ANR, we're looking at DHCD. I mean, there are a lot of agencies and departments that you might be looking at grants to apply for. One thought had been to ask DHCD to do that work of looking at because they have a mobile home park unit, and ask the mobile home park unit to look and see how we might resolve this and have some language that asks them to report back to us on the grants that you would be eligible for and how we can fix the problem with the Secretary of State. We have a little bit more time to do that work.
Okay. Well,
And that's one.
that sounds like that will solve the problem, but the intent was always for it to be manufactured home LECs that are eligible if they're nonprofit, which all of them, that list is 19 of the 19, 17 of them are resident owned communities that are limited equity cooperatives. And all over the state, this state, all over the country, they are eligible because they're nonprofit for public purpose.
But going forward, I believe David said they're all registered as for-profit businesses.
And
Isn't
other
that what I
states are
understood?
here.
Legislative Council, would you be kind enough to wait?
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. I believe what the Secretary of State's office has testified is moving forward at a point in time, the Secretary of State's office determined that they should not be designating these entities as nonprofits when they register with the Secretary of State, because their proper designation is just as a corporate housing structure, a cooperative housing corporation. And so that's how they've been designating them moving forward. I don't know how they go about making some sort of secondary determination after the fact if the corporation gets tax exempt status with the IRS. If they change their registration or designation with the Secretary of State, I don't know. But how they've been moving forward based on the new system that they have and how they've been determining to register them is just as a cooperative housing corporation and not designating it as profit or nonprofit, et cetera. That's my understanding.
So I'm a little confused about the IRS part. Isn't that federal?
Yes.
Okay, so the attempt is not to designate as IRS tax exempt. It's
Right.
state.
Right. My point was simply, I don't know if the Secretary of State is updating the registration if they receive a tax exempt status from the IRS, if they're updating a registration from Cooperative Housing Corporation from there at that point. I don't know if that influences what the Secretary of State does.
Well, and another question is the state allowed to deem something eligible for nonprofit status or review an application with the lens of, oh, we're looking at this as a nonprofit if they don't have the federal designation of exempt? I mean, are they
My understanding is yes, the state has
the ability
states you can register as a nonprofit organization with the Secretary of State's office, yes.
without the proper exempt status from the IRS?
That's my understanding, but it's a question best to.
My understanding as well. Because one is state and one is federal, and you're not looking to exempt from taxes. You're looking for the nonprofit as public purpose.
Right, as in a grant application. Okay, that's clear as mud. I mean, it's a challenge. I think, I mean, committee members, I don't know how you're feeling about this, but I think I feel more comfortable. And I don't mean to just be backing out of this challenge that we face. I think I feel more comfortable having the mobile home unit at DHCD weigh in with us next session and come back with a recommendation on how we treat these to accomplish exactly what you're trying to accomplish, which is how we juggle their actual status at the Secretary of State and how we want to have them viewed for purposes of applying. First of all, what grants are out there, looking at the whole arena of grants that mobile home parks might be eligible for.
And already are receiving. That price grant, there is criteria for the eligibility. One is being a nonprofit. The other one is that you're showing that the income is low to moderate income.
Right.
So they receive.
So they're already, without even having to be nonprofits, they are exhibiting, they're eligible in certain income, for certain grants that have income eligibility requirements.
Correct.
So they,
Which is the LEC to
Right.
begin with. The LEC has criteria that you must be. This is for manufactured homes. There's different LECs, but for manufactured home, LECs operating as a LEC, that there must be low to moderate income. So it's a covenant.
right. Committee members where, I mean,
Well, the object of this is to make these organizations eligible for certain grants.
right,
The grants require that they be nonprofit, one, and what else? What are they?
Low to moderate
Low
income.
moderate income in terms of who they're focused on.
right.
I'm sorry.
That the eligibility for the grant is that they are lower moderate income.
They have to be. Yes.
But if you're looking at a paving project with AOT or they may have other requirements that you may have to actually have it 501c3 or whatever it had.
Right. And the focus is not on that whatsoever.
Well, it might be. I mean, I can see one of these cooperative mobile home parks wanting to actually apply for those kinds of grants and support.
Well, they wouldn't be eligible because you don't get any services as far as the grants. It's typically wastewater, water, trying to think what else.
But those are A&R programs.
Right. But the mobile home parks that have applied have been able to get those grants already. The problem is that list, there's the Secretary of State's list. Some of them say domestic nonprofit. Some of them say domestic for-profit.
So it's
Domestic nonprofits get it, they have no problem getting the grant.
right.
It's the ones that say, and David Hall said, the list is wrong.
Well, the question is there anything they can do at the Secretary of State's office to have the charter or whatever the document is called reissued as a nonprofit? Can they convert?
Well, all that he said in testimony was, if that entity requests it, and we're giving the authority to the Secretary of State through the bill, then they can provide it as nonprofit. Am I correct, Cameron?
So the section in the bill allows the Secretary of State's office to update the registration status of an entity at their request.
At their request.
Right. What I don't know that the Secretary of State's office would do would be, let me back up and say this differently. I don't know what the Secretary of State's office would require in order to update an entity's registration status to nonprofit if it's not already a nonprofit. So that's what I was saying a second ago. You know, if the entity comes in and says, hey, we have tax exempt status from the IRS, will you update our registration with you to reflect that we're a nonprofit? I don't know what their answer would be in that situation. If the entity just comes in and says, hey, we have this language in statute, we serve a public purpose, this has been added in, we want you to update our status and reflect that we're a nonprofit. I get the impression from some of David Hall's testimony that he's saying, no, we're not going to do that.
That's something that needs to be clear.
So
If we're saying that they're a nonprofit and we're allowing them in fact to certify that to someone who's giving them money.
Right.
And they're not really a nonprofit. The question is, what kind of tax returns are they filing? They're filing a nonprofit or for-profit tax return. If they've been filing a federal tax return as for-profit, they're not a nonprofit.
So I think this is part of our challenge, is that it's a little messy. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yes,
And then it would be,
because there's somewhat two, as I see it, there's somewhat two distinct issues. The first is, I think it's pretty clear in the statutory section for these limited equity cooperatives that they're intended to serve a public purpose. They're designed for serving individuals of lower moderate income. The assets of the corporation are limited in what they can be used. If the corporation dissolves, they're required to be transferred to a nonprofit entity, to another limited equity cooperative, et cetera. In the statutory section, it specifically says that the limited equity cooperative, in order to fill the public purpose of providing preserving housing for persons and households of low and moderate income. So I think you've kind of designated that. We have this public purpose of these entities for this goal. And it sounds like they are having difficulties, some of them are having difficulties in accessing certain state funding grant sources. Because these funding grant sources may be saying, you need to be a nonprofit entity.
Right.
And so then the secondary to this is they run into a problem where it's the Secretary of State's office is trying to square peg round hole these entities.
Right.
Because the
That's a good way of putting
nonprofit
it.
designation doesn't necessarily matter because they're a cooperative housing corporation. That's what they are. They're their own unique corporate type. And so they're not really structured like a nonprofit entity, right? They have shareholders. Members of the cooperative are the shareholders of this corporation. Nonprofits don't have shareholders, right? So they don't fit very well. And so I think the issue is trying to resolve, how do we ensure that these entities have access to these funding sources?
Right. And that's, I think, what would benefit with having DHCD mobile home park unit with the Secretary of State's office. Figure out how we can do that so that we don't put the Secretary of State's office in this round, square peg into a round hole problem. Identify the grants in particular that you are eligible for, which are, I think, many actually, as we look at state government, and come back in January with a recommendation. I just think instead of doing them every time sort of as a one-off, I'd rather have it. I mean, it just seems to make more sense to have this problem solved rather than just enable it.
I think it's a missed opportunity because we don't have a lot of time and we need housing. And there are developers that are absolutely interested in forming manufactured home parks, but we need to.
But they can form them now. That forming
But
is
there's
the problem.
But there's problems that new entities will inherit that are big problems. This is one of them.
Right.
I mean, this.
But the Secretary of State doesn't feel like we're really resolving the problem here. I think we'd like to resolve the problem so that it isn't unclear going forward, so that it is clear that all of these, particularly mobile home parks, that are formed as limited equity cooperatives will be treated in X manner. And I'm not sure that they're clear that they will do that with all of the with all the applications in that. I'm not sure that I heard from the Secretary of State they will treat them all that way, because he says they're all for profits. And so I think it would benefit from the two entities that sort of are overseeing housing and business formation, which is SO to the Secretary of State's office, to come together and actually make a recommendation on how we both fix the problem going forward and how we make mobile home, these limited equity cooperatives eligible for these grants. I mean, unless we're just willing to accept the language, because we're running out of time, we have to vote this out by tomorrow. And we've had less time than you had.
Mhm.
And so, Thomas,
Just maybe I didn't remember it well enough, but did the Secretary of State come in raising these concerns? I don't recall that. Oh, yeah. Did they put written testimony together?
no,
My question is, did DHCD, if we simply said a limited equity cooperative may also be eligible for these grants, did they fight that? Did they have a problem with that? I mean, I know we've had this conversation with our park that's owned by the residents. Each of their plots is owned and they've struggled with this. I don't know that this will solve the problem for them, but we just said, like, make them eligible for.
well, I think that's what this done. I mean,
Well,
we
it-
could be clearer. We could be clearer. You're right in this language.
We could just say limited equity cooperatives are eligible
As
for-
nonprofit, because the problem when you're applying for the grant,
Uh-huh.
they see for-profit or they don't see nonprofit. Now,
See, that's-
501(c)(3)
Yeah,
the nonprofit status, it's kind of like, this is the best way I can describe it. If you say apple, there's all different kinds of apples.
mhm.
So when you say nonprofit, that doesn't necessarily mean a 501(c)(3) tax
No,
exempt.
absolutely. But
So then could we say a limited equity cooperative that operates in this way?
Yes.
And maybe the word nonprofit and its general
Shall be-
attachment to tax policy and 501(c)(3) status is the struggle, but we could word it,
we could simply,
Cameron, help me out here, like,
I think
that
we
does
could
not-
word it that all limited
That is
equity
cooperatively owned.
cooperatives functioning at all mobile home park limited equity cooperatives
mhm,
for purposes of
grant
grants
policy.
will
Yeah.
be treated
Yeah.
as
I think that
nonprofits.
was my original wish list as far as that wording.
So
So,
we could be that direct.
So
And just as I suggested at the beginning, we could include just mobile homes in the definition.
So I think that's what you have in the bill. There is a section, it's B1, and it says, if you have the bill in front of you. it's
Okay, on page-
8. Bottom of page 8. So
What
it says,
section is it?
It
Section
is,
3,
Okay.
page 8, B1. So it says a mobile home park organized as a limited equity cooperative. So now we're limiting it to limited equity
Okay, so we-
cooperatives that are a mobile home park.
I'm sorry,
Shall be treated for the purpose of state funding and grants as if it were incorporated as a state nonprofit for public
that
purpose.
says it.
And public
says it.
benefit.
So
Right,
was
I-
there other tax language that confused things?
No, there was the Secretary of State. David Hall came in and really, I have to say, it confused me. And I think confused all of us.
that's why I'm here. That was
I
so
know.
confusing and it was going
It
down
was
the wrong path.
So I think there is still, I would say this a legal thought here.
Right. Well, that's what you're here for.
Right, right. There is still the kind of, that language isn't going to resolve any registration with the Secretary of State's office. And so
Yeah.
based on this B1, it is not going to be the case that any entity that's not registered as a nonprofit would then be able to somehow gain some nonprofit status. What this language is saying is signaling to you funding source, you, DEC, you AOT, you DHCD, whatever the grant source is. The limited equity cooperative would be able to point to this language and say,
Mhm.
we should be treated for this funding as if we're this. So,
Mhm.
and I think that's what you're all driving toward and intending, but just wanted to make sure you're clear. And then the last thing I would just say is, and this is a policy question for you all, it is a very broad brush, if you will, that you're saying any state funding and grant source. And so I'm only bringing that up to say, I don't know what those funding sources are.
And whether or
And-
not any of those sources have some requirement that says it must be a nonprofit. That's the 501c3, the equivalent under the
And it's not gonna
IRS.
change that. If it's.
But you can't point to that statute because that's what's happening right now with the manufactured homes that applied for the grant. You have to jump through those hoops to show them.
So, yeah, however, if we pass this, which this, thank you for going back to this is helpful. I would, in addition, like to ask DHCD and SOF to resolve these challenges going
One
forward.
year
Because,
sunset.
yeah, I think that, well, I just think that they need to resolve because David is saying they're not formed as they want to be. They, I think there are issues to resolve going forward.
The other issue that we resolve also is how they can treat it for tax purposes. Have they been filing as a for-profit with the IRS?
I can send you something from the CPA that works with a lot of the LECs on exactly how they file.
Yeah, but they file as they are structured, one assumes. Yeah, so they're filing as for-profit cooperatives
So
or
we're moving
or
from
nonprofit.
saying err on the side of offering these grants to limited equity cooperatives.
Right, and then,
And we'll look at it again if there's a problem.
well, and also just asking the Secretary of State and the
We gotta find
PhD.
out what the number of questions that are arising. We shouldn't continue this.
No, we
We
need to fix it. I think we need to fix it.
So.
I'm happy to consider going forward with this, which is still pretty messy. I mean, you're being asked to be considered something that you technically aren't. But for all the reasons you've identified, and then move forward with and
Two things you could do based on the conversation Senator Brock, you just mentioned, and Madam Chair that you mentioned a bit ago, and you could put a sunset and then require a report back from, you mentioned THCD.
and SOS.
Give us the information on what funding sources there are that these entities access to, because, as a legal policy thought, it would be better to ensure that the grants themselves, the eligibility for them is being addressed as opposed to a
Yeah,
broad
that
statement.
is-
But
And this is in any access to state funding.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, because I think DHCD is now keenly aware of trying to make this work. Let's hope ANR gets this memo.
Well, AOT, I mean, there are a
Yeah,
lot of,
exactly. I'm trying to think of,
roadway.
going to make sure.
and quite honestly, there may be
The
non-state grant, there may be non-state
Yeah.
grants that you would want to access. Let's say an incredibly benevolent developer wanted to give the state, $10 million to help improve mobile home infrastructure,
Mhm.
mobile home park infrastructure. That might be possible.
Well,
someday.
and we had to have this conversation explicitly about mobile home parks with VHCB in the Home Act.
Yes.
Because at that time, mobile homes could not even be considered housing or really affordable housing. So, I mean, let's make sure that it touches the nonprofits that receive a lot of state housing dollars.
Reconcile it's also the IR and the market tax issue.
Yes,
Because
Yes.
what you're asking to do in a way is also look back at the organization of taking non-tax money. How have they been filing? It's a full question.
so I think
The
what I'm
grants are
hearing-
tax, some of the grants are taxable.
Some of the grants are tax.
Yeah,
if you get income, if they're revenue for something, it might well be.
some of them are taxable, but there is no profit to be made in a mobile home LEC. What comes in is exactly how it's operated.
So I am hearing that we're generally okay with this bill. This bill, all the fees and stuff go to finance. So I think we're gonna let finance work on that. And we'll keep it as is and ask for a sunset with a report back from DHCD's mobile home unit and the Secretary of State working together with tax. Yes, with tax to make a recommendation on how we fix this going forward.
Realistically, we should talk to the tax department's whole
We-
mess.
I was just gonna email
right, we don't have time.
Commissioner Schultz
I don't know,
about
we,
Yeah.
getting
Sadly, our time is not on our side. So we can, with this, you can, we can talk about it in finance. We can also further talk about that in finance.
Thank you.
Thank Gail.
I might have missed, I missed the first 5 minutes, like sound wise, but is the language about non-discrimination of manufactured housing the same as ours? Okay, great.
Yes,
I mean, I hope it's
everything
clear,
is
yeah,
aligned.
but I just want to point out again, we shouldn't be buying at some risk manufactured housing components when there continues to be chaos and confusion and discrimination with mobile and manufactured housing.
Right.
We need to solve these problems for
Well,
people.
this is a piece that approving them helps, reduce that stigma in a large
Small
measure.
steps.
Thank you.
Well, Gail, thank you for helping in a slightly
Thank you.
confusing bill, which but I know has a lot of technical fixes that are really going to be helpful, and I appreciate that. And we're so grateful to you for your work
Thank you.
on this issue. You have been dogged, tenacious. We appreciate it. So, if the committee's okay, I think we're fine to vote this bill out. If we have an amendment to with that charge,
Sunset.
So there's a sunset and 2 reports.
the
That's
A
there.
report.
But you want to report from DHCD, but then you want to report from the Secretary of State for the DH.
I think we want them to work together to resolve this problem.
who's responsible for produce the report?
Well, my thought was, and so this is, correct me with what you all would like to see. My thought was you were saying you want a report from DHCD to outline what are these funding and grant opportunities that these entities would have.
Part of the report.
And then separate from that would be Secretary of State and Department of Taxes. You know, what is the recommendation to address the issue regarding their registration status with the
That-
state?
Is probably a better thing, although it would be good to have DHCD's mobile home unit
Mhm.
person working on that issue.
I can add that in.
Okay. I would add that in.
Tax,
To report.
DHCD, well,
When do we want the sunset? In a year or 2 years?
A few years, not fast.
I don't need a sunset.
I do need-
Sunset, Jim, thanks.
I do need a sunset this morning to fix it up.
Then you.
So what sunset would you, we're on the mobile home park bill. What would you suggest in a year? I mean, because it would be great to have them come back to us.
So it can be. done.
Actually, can it be dealt with next? So, why don't we ask for the report back in January? And so that these committees deliver to the committees of jurisdiction. From both.
Good.
And, so that we can work on it next year. And I think that would be, David, what we're doing is accepting the language, even though it's a little, messy, because of the Secretary of State, and asking actually for work to be done to clarify and, make recommendations on how we go forward in English speaking. 757, the, manufactured and mobile home park bill, which
LECs.
LAC. Limited equity cooperatives, something I did not know about before we began this bill. So thank you, Gail. In
Thank you.
addition, we're all better educated as that is.
That's great.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Have
Yeah.
a great day.
My pleasure, our pleasure. When do you think you might be able to get this to us?
tomorrow.
Okay, so you're with us tomorrow morning. Why, we okay with looking at this tomorrow morning, and we're gonna vote on it tomorrow morning, which will make the program very happy. Okay? Great, terrific, thank you very much. So, let's take a 6-minute break, and we will come back at 9:15 with the CHIP amendment, language, and this, I'm not what we have language,